Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Greer.
Thank you.
And for those joining us many people are very much aware of your work, your new film, your new book, but for those who aren't, can you just give a brief background of this phenomenal work you're doing right now?
Well, Unacknowledged is the name of the film and the book, and it comes from the first word in a level of classification in top secret projects known as Unacknowledged Special Access Projects, or USAPs. And USAPs are the crown jewel of secret covert programs, not all of which, but some of which deal with interstellar UFO and related so-called zero-point energy and free energy technologies. So this film is sort of an expose, as is the book, a more thorough treatment than the film even, of that. I mean, the film has been #1 on iTunes for most of the time since May.
It's
when
trending
it came out,
on Netflix.
And it's now the top 1 or 2 on Netflix. And people are very interested in this because what we tried to do in the film is not preach to, the echo chamber of people interested in UFOs and all that conspiracy stuff, but really get to what not a conspiracy theory is about this, but what are the facts. So the book and the documentary focus on military witnesses, whistleblowers inside the Air Force, corporate aerospace sources that deal with this issue. So it has a provenance, and it has evidence for it that's solid. And that was really our objective, so that the man on the street who really knows very little about this issue could go to the film or the book and really get brought up to speed about it.
Now, as you show in your film, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence to support many of these positions that you're explaining and revealing. And yet, despite the evidence, there remains, of course, a tremendous amount of, I wouldn't even say skepticism, I would say dogmatic denial of reality.
Well, it's interesting. We've actually won the war but lost the battle. Let me tell you what I mean. When I first started, I'm a trauma doctor, emergency doctor by training. I left medicine to deal with this some years ago, and back in 2001, about 16 years ago, this past May, we had a National Press Club event in Washington where the first 22 of over 100 military and intelligence whistleblowers came forward. Now that event was seen by hundreds of millions of people all over the world, but the intelligence community globally, and in the US particularly, reached out to the big media and said, don't do follow-up on this.
Yes.
All right, now this we can prove. Now, interestingly, what that means is that when we started this effort, maybe 25 to 30% of the public thought UFOs were real and the government was keeping something secret. Now it's up near 60%. 43% of the public thinks we're currently being visited by interstellar civilizations, which we are. So this is something where we've, in a sense, won the war, but the battle of conventional wisdom and the media, that we haven't won, because contrary to what people believe, and I think that this is a central point to anyone listening right now. I couldn't have said this on May 9th when the film came out. I can say it here in September of 2017. That one of the central tenets of the film is that the military and intelligence community have folks in the major media who will spike or kill stories related to this. Now, no less a figure than a man who for almost a decade was a senior Air Force Office of Special Investigations, a counterintelligence official.
Doty?
Richard Doty, in the movie, states point blank that he used to carry bags of cash to people in regional, local, and national media.
Oh, that's right.
All right?
Yes.
To alter stories, to stop it from being covered, whatever. Yeah. Now, we also have Daniel Sheehan, who's a constitutional attorney. He did the Pentagon Papers, the Silkwood case, the Kerr-McGee case. It's Silkwood, if you've seen the movie. He's been our constitutional attorney since '01. He was involved in a project where he saw a document where there were 42 different people on the payroll of the CIA who were senior editor, particularly national security people, in the media around the world. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a fact.
Right.
So the idea that we have a free press, we have a fake free press. We have a pseudo-free media. You can cover the blue stain on the dress for Hillary Clinton. You cannot cover this subject. It will be absolutely stopped. Now, when the movie makes this not just my opinion, but people who are on the inside and who actually, outrageously, if you look at that clip, if you look at the whole Doty interview, which is available on our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS, like the star system, SiriusDisclosure.com, you'll see that he goes into some depth about the fact that, oh yeah, this was a routine thing that we did. And it's still going on. Now, the proof of it is that unacknowledged, well, I mean, when was the last time an indie crowdfunded film, crowdfunded by the public, which is the second largest crowdfunded film in history, that in itself is newsworthy, then becomes the #1 movie on iTunes for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Almost never
then
happens.
rockets to the top of Netflix. No major media entity will do a story. No major interviews in the national media. This proves the point that's made in the film,
yes,
that this is part of, quote, the cover-up, that the corruption of the media is rampant and outrageous. And forget the whole UFO and the fact that we have technologies that could get us off oil and gas and coal, which we do, locked in a black box in these USAPs. That idea that our democracy and our republic has been completely undermined by these fascists, anyone should be concerned about. Now, most people have their heads in the sand. What we're trying to do is pull people's head out, have them look around. Now, you talk about the FDA and the CDC and all these things. Those would be like the minor cover-ups. The crown jewel of the cover-ups, the disclosure of this information, #1, that we're not alone in the universe, which 70% of the public believe that, but that we've been visited, that we have acquired technologies that we've studied from but not only human research, starting back in the 20s and teens of the 20th century, but also from studying extraterrestrial vehicles that we've downed using electronic weapons and reverse engineered, that those technologies have been fully studied and have been reproduced and were fully operational by October 1954.
So they've stolen our future. They've stolen,
hijacked it. I call it, it's the
what could
lost
have
century.
been.
Yes.
We could be living in greater abundance, in perfect health, over unity, energy.
Yep. This documentary and book prove they exist. Would completely upend the power structure. And those folks don't want it upended. They want to maintain the hegemony of the petrodollar centralized economic system. I call it the slave system, that we're actually slaves living on someone's plantation. It's just not acknowledged anymore. So the alteration of the macroeconomic order into something of this big of a change would mean that every man, woman, and child village around the world would be energy self-sufficient,
right,
agriculturally self-sufficient.
You're talking about the mass decentralization, right, of technology, putting into the hands, right, of people all over the world. And yet what we are witnessing today with the media consolidation of power, economic consolidation of power, and so on, is the centralization or the monopolization of power.
Right.
And the powers that be are now succeeding through Google, Facebook, the NSA fronts. They're succeeding now in dominating not just the economies of the world, but the very narratives, the ideas, what you can debate about, or what you will be caught saying, searching on Google or using
right,
an email.
Right.
So how do we now, is there a way that humanity can overcome that?
Oh, sure.
How
Absolutely.
do we do that?
So I'm an emergency doctor, and we do something called triage. Okay, so for me as a doctor, looking at the triage, what we have to do, this is the top of the list, is to disclose this information, bring out the technologies that are, and put them into peaceful energy generation and completely transform the planet. It's eminently doable, but it can't be done by one man or two or three. We're going to have to get a lot of people involved, and we're going to have to get some people who are also going to walk the talk financially. You find there are all these sort of pseudo fixes for the environment. Trillions going into solar and wind farms. Notice those are centralized utilities.
Right.
and GE and all these big corporations. No one's putting any funding into the actual solution.
Of course not.
Because that would upset that whole structure.
It's like there's no funding going into actual cancer cures.
Sure.
They need cancer to continue the cancer industry.
Right, and the more we pollute the planet, the more people cancer rates go up. Even though you find it's like whack-a-mole medically. But this
keeps their system going.
On the environmental way, if you look at the entire global biosphere, we're doing whack-a-mole environmentally. You know, we're basically spitting in the face of a Category 5 hurricane, and it's just blowing right over us. But I mean, all the solar, all the wind, all those sort of solutions. It's too little. It's too late. And so what this movie and book are saying is, let's keep our eye on what the objective is. But to get there, it can't be some secret tech company in Austin or someplace doing a secret energy device. Because guess what? The people who have done that have had their technology seized under national security orders.
Patents are always seized.
And if you look at the movie, there's a report from the Federation of American Scientists, mainstream organization, came out in 2010, 7 years ago, that said that there are 5,135 patents that have been seized under national security order. So most people who work on these technologies try to do the conventional business model, venture capital model, tech model, and they always fail.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, let's learn from history, not repeat it. And let's put together a solution. Now, that solution is, we may not have the perfect, if you look at the movie, this Air Force intelligence officer says, out of one of these interstellar craft, there was about an 18-inch rectangular translucent object that you could run a wristwatch or a whole city off of that was pulling energy from the zero-point energy field. And that's true. We may not come up with that in 2 years, but we could come up with something that would run your house, business, and car with no pollution and off the grid and no public utilities.
Dr. Greer, in one of your YouTube videos that we did a story about on National News, you were talking about a possibility, correct me if I'm not paraphrasing this correctly, but a possibility that the advanced technology that our government owns could be used to fake contact or to create theater for the purpose, I believe, of a mass manipulation.
Sure. So between 1953 and now, there's 64 years. If you look at the 1953 document from Bedell Smith, the CIA director, it talks about the psychological value of the UFO subject. Now, this was around the time they mastered gravity control. They had all these projects going, and they realized that the people, some 5% of the public have seen a UFO. So they figure at some point we're not going to be able to really hide the fact these are around, but we can do a psychological game where they are either debunked and ridiculed so that no one in polite or scientific establishment will talk about it, which they were very good at discrediting. And if they do, they'll be considered lunatic. But if they get through that and believe it's out there, they'll think it's a threat. All right. So beginning in the 50s and 60s, they began hoaxing events. So the hoaxing of extraterrestrial events using things that look like a UFO, made by Lockheed Martin, and my uncle worked for Northrop Grumman, in these classified aerospace projects where they have these anti-gravity devices, look like a flying saucer. They're not ET. There are ones that are extraterrestrial, but I'm talking about the ones that are man-made. And they will stage events. And then they started, in the early days, they started getting people with certain deformities or with very short stature and doing like Hollywood costumes. And they would go and put these things out and they'd start abducting people. Now this Air Force intelligence officer admits this, that the military, very deep, unacknowledged special access projects have been involved in the hoaxing and faking of contact events for their psychological warfare value. And what that means is to induce fear.
Okay.
Okay, and the long-term plan, as Werner von Braun said, the man who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler, the V2 rocket. The V2 rocket was invented by Werner von Braun. His spokeswoman for the last 4 or 5 years of his life is a whistleblower on our team, Carol Rosen. And she said on his deathbed, Werner von Braun said, they're going to basically hoax an alien threat to unite the world around a military junta. This is, but in order to do that, it can't come out of the blue. They've been doing the psychological warfare preparation since the 50s and 60s. So what I'm saying to people is that 90+% of everything on this subject, on the internet, in documentaries, on TV, is disinformation designed to sow confusion and fear that there's a threat from outer space. Now, one of the things about this that's always so amazing to me, and it shows how little critical thinking there is in the UFO field, frankly, and in the New Age field as well, is that any interstellar civilization that was hostile, coming across our little planet, beginning to detonate atomic weapons in 1945, could have shut this whole baby down in a nanosecond.
Sure.
All right, because you're talking about faster than the speed of light travel, faster than the speed of light electronics, communication, and weaponization.
Advanced
so if they wanted to actually fix that problem, it would have been point, set, match in 1945. They haven't. And the reason these interstellar civilizations haven't is that, it sounds like the prime directive in Star Trek, but it is. They don't interfere unless they absolutely have to. Mm-hmm. All right? Now, they're just like, I tell people the analogy that people can kind of relate to is how successful was our implementation and foisting of Jeffersonian democracy on Afghanistan after 16 years of running around in the desert? Not much. So you cannot impose from an outside, higher developed civilization onto a less developed civilization. We have to evolve from within, all right? Consciously, spiritually, technologically. And if it's imposed from outside, it'll fail. But the intelligence community has seized on the vacuum, the lack of critical research and thinking in this area, to do all kinds of staged and hoax events that scare the hell out of people. So the average person I run into on the street go, oh yeah, but aren't you afraid of being abducted? I said, well, yeah, but it's not by extraterrestrials. It's a covert cell running out of Kirkland Air Force Base or out of Nellis or one of these Air Force bases in a man-made anti-gravity device using these things that look like aliens, but they're not ET. So this is that whole narrative was concocted by the intelligence community. And the public, the movie Alien, the science fiction crowd, the Hollywood crowd, the UFO public, and the general populace have swallowed that fake stuff, hook, line, and sinker. One of the things we try to do in this documentary is to pull the curtain back on this fraud.
If these extraterrestrial or advanced civilizations are observing us, do you believe that they would, or that perhaps they already have, intervened when we take such disastrous steps, such as launching nuclear weapons, that would devastate the planet itself? In other words, is there a point of intervention that we have crossed or we might cross?
Well, this is a very difficult thing to talk about, but what you'll see is that beginning in the 40s and 50s, there was a presence, overflight presence, and reconnaissance presence of every single atomic and nuclear weapons facility everywhere, not just in the US, but also in France, Great Britain, Russia, etc. So obviously they're very concerned about that, but they're not going to just go and shut them all down. They have demonstrated they can. One of the famous cases we exposed was the Minot, North Dakota Strategic Air Command, where there were somewhere between 18 and 21 intercontinental ballistic missile silos were taken offline and rendered unlaunchable the same morning, because there was an ET craft out there basically showing, if you guys launch all these, and this is in the darkest days of the Cold War, we can sort of stop that. But I think that people are mistaken. They conflate those events with the idea that somehow Big Brother from space is going to fix all our problems. No, they were just sending a signal up through the national security system that if you go to mutual assured destruction, there could be an intervention, because we really don't want you destroying this beautiful planet. I mean, their message was a message of, please don't destroy it. In fact, one of the captains who was there, Air Force captain, said the feeling he got from that event was that the ETs were trying to say, please don't destroy this beautiful planet. But if you go that far, we could intervene. Now, people say, then why didn't they intervene in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I said, those were terrible, lost hundreds of thousands of lives. It wasn't something that would be an extinction level event.
Those weren't thermonuclear.
The fact of the matter is these interstellar civilizations aren't going to come in and try to get involved in these things. They want us to fix it. They want us to fix our planet so that we're peaceful. Then they're going to welcome us in space. They want to fix our environment, and they know we have the technologies. They want us to do it. We're the children of Earth, and we have the primary responsibility, not somebody out there in interstellar space. So now they're observing us in case things go very badly wrong, and let's hope they don't. But in the meanwhile, I'd say, let's not sit on our hands. Let's actually do this and make this change, this whole transformation to a new era on this planet happen. We can do it.
How do you stay on course with your determination and you have to have a lot of courage to speak out in that way. You and I are similar, although our topic focus is different. You know, we're both ridiculed in the media, but we both have a scientific background. And we both present a lot of evidence on the issues that we focus on. Yet, you know, you're attacked all the time. Are people just waking up and knowing that that's nonsense? They know that the fake news is fake now?
They do. What's interesting is that, you know, Congress has, what, a 15% approval rating?
Yeah.
The media has a lower one. The only thing with less esteem than the Congress is the media. Everyone knows it's all nonsense, and no one trusts them. And as well, they should not be trusted. So they're turning to other places, and this is why there's such an appetite. When we put this film out, I mean, remember, this is not a big Hollywood blockbuster film where you put $50 to $100 million in advertising.
What was your budget on the film?
You know, I mean, the budget on the film was about $500,000.
Wow.
And we did the whole movie for that. There was maybe $50,000 or so put into what's called prints and advertising, and it was #1. I mean, it was beating out $100 million films on iTunes and Netflix. You know, and I tell people this shows the power of democracy, and the bright side of this internet era is that we can do that now, and we couldn't have done that 10 or 15 years ago. So I say let's use the tools that are out there to our advantage while we can. And let's go to this next step where we put together a healing program for the planet. Okay, health and healing for Gaia. All right, and that's the next big thing that we have to achieve. It's going to be harder than the informational, educational effort we're involved with, because now you're talking with hard technologies. And there are very powerful interests that do not want technologies to come out that would terminate the oil industry. Okay, so we have to figure out a strategy that would frustrate their tactical and strategic efforts. Now, that's why I tell people, you know, I've come up with this New Earth Energy Incubator. You know, Google has an incubator, Apple, they all have incubator funds to do kind of out there research, cutting edge. We need something for the planet and for humanity that's an incubator, research and development effort. And that's what I think we have to find the support to do. And we need to find a few enlightened people, or a whole lot of people, to put the backing into that and get that up and stood up properly. But our view of it is that it has to be something where from the moment it's announced to the time you release a technology, it's all open source.
That's right. I completely agree.
And it's not secret, and also it's live streamed. So the laboratory workstations are literally online in real time, so that people see what's going on. There's total transparency. And nothing held back, because when people keep something secret for as long as a month, in that 30-day period, that's what I call the kill box, where these petro-Nazis come in, confiscate your device, sometimes assassinate the people who have them, do all kinds of things. So you have to do this with the whole world watching.
Well, put us on the disclosure node list. I mean, we can be a mirror broadcast.
Exactly. It could be a box there just showing what's going on.
Yeah.
And then the instant we would have a breakthrough. But first we have to find the funding. This is not like developing an app where you can have some guy in his flip-flops and pajamas sitting in his basement. This is a serious physics. Okay, you're talking about high energy physics where you're creating a what's called a pointing vector into this infinite energy field, and you better know what you're doing. All right, you need really specialized equipment. You need scientists, physicists, people who are materials managers who know specialized materials. You need all these people working together in a laboratory. So to stand that thing up is going to be tens of millions to maybe 100 million.
Sure.
But like I said, we just had a boxing match where, not counting the promoter, the two people boxing got 400 million.
Yeah.
So you don't tell me that our society can't do this. We can, but unfortunately most people don't understand what is at the core of the secrecy on the UFO subject. And the reason it's ridiculed so soundly and so expertly. And these people know what they're doing. These psychological warfare people,
of course
they really know how to discredit people. That whole secrecy is because they're protecting this crown jewel of technology that these petro-fascists don't want out.
I like that term. Let me offer this.
Yeah.
We have a privately funded, very advanced analytical laboratory. We do ICP-MS, mass spec instrumentation, time of flight instrumentation, and so on. Most labs won't touch the kinds of artifacts and soil samples and things that you want tested. Our lab is ISO accredited, internationally recognized. I'll test anything you want for free.
Oh, great.
Every element that we can test, including isotopic ratios. We can look at the ratios of different isotopes. But of course, no radioactive things, please. We don't need that. But everything else, we'll test, and it's right here in Central Texas. So let me offer that. It's available to you and your team.
Could be useful.
Absolutely. Looking at composition of some unknown, object.
Yeah,
whatever.
Occasionally something like that comes across my desk. Yeah.
Yeah. We find there's a tremendous amount of censorship in science, that the only allowable science has to follow these very narrow categories.
Right.
What would you say to people who maybe are intrigued by science and maybe they want to go into the sciences, but they also want to be part of the solution, the big picture solution? They don't want to be part of this cabal of disinformation.
Well, I think people who have that inclination need to organize, and it's all networking. I mean, the way that I've gone from an emergency doctor to now someone who's getting this information out to tens of millions of people, it's all grassroots. So we need to find people who are going to actually support serious, no pun intended, research and development in these areas of energy generation. And I think that anyone interested in that area, they can study it, but they cannot do it alone. Here's a cautionary tale. People who think they're going to sit in their garage or basement and do this, if anyone listening has a device like this that they're working on, or one that's operational, that they think they're going to take on the normal technology pathway, they need to get hold of us yesterday, and we'll then launch it. But they have, and we have people, we have people who can make them whole if they have something operational.
And if they don't, they could end up being gone.
Yes. Well, there's a whole team of people who had purchased the estate of Stan Meyer that had a water fuel car. And what people don't know is that he had a toroid. It looked like a donut. That was a 0-point free energy system.
Oh, really?
That had a national security order on it. Our team went there and saw it. Now, there was a group in Michigan that outbid us, an engineering group, and it disappeared into a black hole. They did it secretively. Next thing I know, their chief funder calls me up and says they're all running for their lives. Last I heard, they've all been assassinated, and all that technology is gone. So that's all recent. This is all in the last 5-10 years.
Wow.
So I tell people, you have to understand what you're dealing with here. This is not like inventing an iPhone or something. You're dealing with something that's making an end run at the entire global elites system, much more so than big pharma, much more so than medical stuff that you deal with. It's orders of magnitude beyond that. It's hundreds of trillions of dollars. So I think that people working in this area need to know what they're dealing with, because otherwise they think that, oh, well, I've invented this thing. And one of the sad things I've observed over the last 27 years of doing this is how many people have developed these devices, have tried to do the usual business and strategic or venture capital and distribution plan, and they've all vanished. Every single one of them. So if someone does have one of these, or they are working on something like this, please contact us and let us put it on a trajectory that will get it out to the public. And you know, if people have invested to get a certain point, we have folks on my team now that can make them whole, frankly, if they can prove it.
Right.
But here's what they got to do. It's got to be testable,
Yeah,
reproducible,
right.
and transparent. And they have to agree with an open source release of it.
Absolutely.
All right. And if not, I won't even talk to them.
Yeah, they can't be a black box.
I've spent almost $1 million of our funds going around the world with people who are brilliant scientifically, but they have no strategic knowledge, and every one of them have failed. So, you know, I mean, I have personally briefed CIA directors and people on the Senate Intelligence Committee, generals and admirals at the Pentagon. In every one of these cases, what I've found is that when you're dealing with an unacknowledged special access project, you know, truly unacknowledged, you're in it's like really a different universe. And people dealing with these technologies have to understand that's what they're dealing with. And frankly, you know, I've been threatened plenty of times over the years. I've had 3 people I've worked with on my team assassinated. And, you know, there's a former CIA director who was going to hand off one of these devices to us, and around $50 million in sort of seed money so we could get it out, who the week he was going to meet with a member of my board, they found him floating down the Potomac River. Absolutely true. Bill Colby. Everyone thinks it was an accident or he committed suicide. No. His best friend came to me and said he was taken out. Wetworks. It's called Wetworks Assassination Team. But so, again, he was trying to do it clandestinely. And I said, no, we have to do this with the whole world watching. Now, back in the 90s when that happened, you didn't have Facebook and Twitter and this and that and all the streaming capabilities. Now we do. We have the tools now that we didn't have 10 years ago. So I tell people, let's use them to our advantage this time.
Peer-to-peer news distribution that doesn't go through
Exactly.
Google, doesn't go through Facebook. All right, lastly, to wrap this up, I want to acknowledge you and your work and thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
And I want you to let you know that myself and millions of people who will eventually watch this really appreciate you sticking to your beliefs and not being one of those who gives in, compromises, gets bribed, gets silenced, because those people don't matter. It's people like you who stick to your guns who really change the world. So thank you.
Thank you. And you have to have that kind of vision. And people tell me, what makes you tick? I say, well, I have a vision where I can see past the current state of the world to a planet that is at peace, has no poverty, the environment's pristine, but high tech, but decentralized, completely decentralized. That is doable today. And so that's a beautiful world that we could have. And then we can go interstellar.
Support our films for humanity. Visit healthrangerstore.com. The cleanest lab-verified health products in the world.